Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Racinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Crusade Channel. Always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, if you're listening to us, get in the chat room, crusadechannel.com/chat. That is the only social media out there worth actually socializing in. A couple of notes real quick, and then we're going to get into a real meaty conversation tonight, and one that we think is right up Joe and Joe's alley. But let me just say right off the bat, there is a big subscriber push going on at the Crusade Channel. Crusade Channel is proud to announce that recently we added Kennedy Hall to the lineup. Kennedy is just a phenomenal guy, very informative, very intelligent, and very entertaining. So Kennedy's now added to the roster. So if you go on crusadechannel.com and you hit listen free, you're going to get a free trial subscription. And at the end of which we, along with Mike Church, the King Dude, we wholeheartedly believe you're going to want to be a subscriber. Crusade Channel is behind a wall. It cannot get taken down. Cannot be censored. That's the way it's structured. So Google and YouTube and the rest of them go crazy all they want. Guess what? Crusade Channel's here to stay. We would encourage you to do that. On top of that, Joe and I are on Patreon. If you want to drop a couple bucks in every month and help us out from $5 to $50,000 a month, if you're super duper rich, please do so at patreon.com/The Frontline with Joe and Joe. And obviously on social media, wherever you find us, our producer, Jonathan Ross, has us across 25 or 30 different platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Gab, Twitch. So we're out there. Wherever you see us, please take a second and click something that's going to help us. That's all we can ask. And as always, keep us in your prayers. Having said that, we're going to jump right in tonight, because I want to preface this, okay? We're constantly being told now, everybody out there knows Joe Biden is a devout Catholic. And our argument here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe is he is, if you're talking about American Catholicism. But it didn't start with him. Far from it. Far from it. And this is where you have to look back into history and see where it started. And where it started was the anti-Catholicism of the 1950s. I mean, this country's basically, for its entirety, has been fairly anti-Catholic. We're not crying. That's just the reality, okay? But the Catholicism was coming on after World War II in the 1950s. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, okay? And what wrecked it? And I'm talking about good old-fashioned Catholicism. I'm talking about traditional Latin Mass before Vatican II, before the Novus Ordo, okay? Notice we're going to talk about how in the 50s, Catholicism was vibrant in America. And you know who wrecked it? John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy wrecked it, along with his Democrat minions, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people in the Catholic Church. And that's a conversation. Hey, it might take the whole time. We don't know. It might take a half hour. But either way, we want to have it because there's a lot of levels going on there. And if we're going to get our nation back on the right track, I'm sorry, all of our Protestant brothers and sisters out there, we're going to talk about this, okay? This country needs objective moral boundaries. There's no better place to find those moral boundaries than in the church founded by Jesus Christ, which is the Roman Catholic Church. Having said that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe Racinello.
And as Joe said, this is a very good conversation, because I think there's a myth that surrounds the Kennedys, the whole Camelot idea. And we're going to break that down. Chris Bedford in the Federalist wrote this article. It was called "The Great Lie About John F. Kennedy, the Bishops in the American Catholic Church." We want to just take a few highlights from that article. Brother Andre Marie, I want to give him a shout out. He posted this on social media this past week. It caught my eye, and then I threw it over to Joe, and we thought it would be a great conversation to blow out, because frankly, I think it's an important one, because I think there's a lot of, for lack of a better way to explain it, bullcrap that is basically believed around the Kennedy mystique.
I want to use the other word, but we'll stick with bullcrap. It's a family show after all.
So, we want to kind of discuss that a little bit and talk about the harm that was caused as a result of it. So we'll just start it off. The Catholic Church benefited enormously from JFK's presidency, pollster Larry Sabato wrote. He also added prejudice against Catholics declined, and millions were exposed to the Catholic rituals. Catholic leaders welcomed the JFK effect. The problem with this civics fairy tale is this: it's completely ignorant of the real contents of the speech. And this was a very important aspect of the article. It talks about the speech that JFK gave to the Greater Houston Ministerial Association in front of hundreds of Protestant ministers. And it's built on an elite view of Catholicism in politics and is bankrupt of any serious religious-minded analysis. In short, as with so many things in American political education, it is a great secular myth. Now, they are spot on when they say that it's devoid of any serious religious-minded analysis. I say this all the time. Anytime you read anything about the Catholic Church in the mainstream media, particularly the New York Times, the Washington Post, you would think that they would put somebody on such an article that has, you don't have to agree with it, but you should have some insight into it.
Right.
And they don't.
No, they
none. Don't. You would say, I read these things, like, especially when you just to, go off on a little bit of a tangent, like when there's going to be a new pope,
right?
They talk like it's almost like an election, like the president,
right.
And you're almost like,
clue.
You're like, it doesn't work that way.
Is that the white smoke or is that the black smoke? And it's like it's like the story you tell all the time when we're here on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, about Hillary Clinton when she went to Mexico and she looked at Our Lady of Guadalupe and she said to the priest, "Who's the artist?" You got to know something. Like, again, Joe, remember, we're the dummies. We're the dummies, according to them. They're the elites. Where Joe and I, our PhDs in common sense that are hanging all over our walls mean nothing to them. We're the dummies, but we're prepared. I'm not going to shy away from a debate or a conversation with somebody, and Joe and I are certainly going to have our facts in order. These people don't even have their facts in order. I mean, that's how we're. And again, I bring that up to say these are the smart people. Go ahead, Joe.
No, but talking about this, and we're going to get into some detail about this particular speech that JFK gave to the Houston Protestant Minister Association, whatever the heck it was called.
I want to just say this, and it's important for everybody to understand. It's because of the fact that Christopher Bedford is writing this in the Federalist, okay? When we try to understand where we're at, when we try to understand, and this is why Joe and I are talking about this, when we try to understand how we've gotten to this point, okay, most people don't know about this speech. Most people don't. But if you want to look, again, Joe and I always say, look to the source of the problem. The source of the problem is not Joe Biden. The source of the problem is watered down Catholicism in America that prior to JFK wasn't watered down. But this fairy tale that you're talking about, Joe Racinello, that was imposed. And what happens, and this is why I'm bringing it up, a lot of people just don't know. And that's why we're here, to tell you something you might not have heard of, but I think, and Joe thinks, is very important when you look at the course of politics, particularly from a Catholic lens, in the last 60 or 70 years.
And basically what Kennedy had to do was he had to convince America that he wasn't a papist. And that was, if you ask me, the goal of this particular speech. And frankly, I'm not picking on the South. I love people in the South. I love everybody. But it was done in Texas, Houston, Texas. This is, like there are hotbeds of Catholicism in America, but I've traveled the United States. I mean, we'll talk about the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online. It's in Louisiana. Route 10, I've worked in Louisiana, from Lake Charles to Baton Rouge to Lafayette to New Orleans. I've done jobs in there. I've driven across the whole state on Route 10. North of Route 10 are Baptists. South of Route 10 are Catholics. And New Orleans, and Louisiana is sort of an anomaly with regard to the South because you have a lot of immigrants that came through, the ports. You had Sicilians, you had French, you had Spanish. They brought Catholicism, i.e. the Cajuns, they're Catholic.
Well, when you look, and I never knew this, my father was the one who told me this years ago, and I always thought all the Italians were in New York and New Jersey.
No, the Sicilians are in New Orleans. The Italian grocer, it's a famous, I believe it's on Decatur. I've been to it. That's where the muffaladas, the first sandwich, they're Sicilian.
But my father used to say, in other words, why? Because again, I thought Italians were only here in the Northeast. He says no. He says, down in Louisiana, New Orleans, there's a large Italian American, or traditionally there's been a large Italian-American population in St. Louis, and they have the statue of St. Louis there. Why? Because they went up the Mississippi, so it makes sense. Also to San Francisco. But my point, my father jokingly, well, maybe not jokingly, says, you know why we're a lot of Sicilians in New Orleans? He said, why? Because it's a port. You do a lot of smuggling through a port.
Well, there you go.
But yeah, so there's a lot of Italians that are a lot of, and you're talking about serious Roman Catholicism. You're not talking about Joe Biden Catholicism. When you're talking about, let's say, for argument's sake, those Catholics in Louisiana, okay, they're Catholic. They're Catholic.
Well, I bring this up because he's basically, in the South, again, a lot of the South isn't Catholic. I mean, it's just a fact. I can remember one time I was traveling through Tennessee, and on Sunday, I had in Nashville, there was one mass. It was a Latin mass at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. There are Protestants in the South. It's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. Whereas in cities where immigrants came, they're Catholic. I'm just stating, some demographic fact. And he was down in Houston, and he was basically making his pitch to the Protestants, convincing them that, listen, I'm not going to bow to the Pope. Even though I'm Catholic from Massachusetts, I am not going to bow to the Pope. And these are the things he said.
Now, this is shocking, because it's one thing to say, I'm a Roman Catholic. And again, I think this would have been totally truthful. I'm a Roman Catholic. I believe in Catholic ideas, all right, about morality, okay, in all areas, not just sexual morality, which we'll get into, because that's one of the biggest problems that Protestants have with the practical application of Catholic teaching in America, is because Catholicism has something definite to say about sexual morality, okay? That he could have just said, this is what informs my worldview. And very simply, I support church teaching on these matters. But here's one thing, and I'm going to hand it back over to Joe. You know what we're finding out now, and why this is an important conversation, why it's great that Brother Andre Marie shared Christopher Bedford's article, is because we're seeing the bad fruit of this now. And it's good to tell people, you want to know something? You have nothing to fear if we had a little bit of Catholic teaching, let's say, infused in our culture and in our law, because what we have now is a disaster. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, basically, Kennedy promised that no man of God would advise him or even seek to advise him or his presidency, saying he believes in America where no public official either requests or accepts instructions on public policy from the Pope. Again, he is basically making his sales pitch to Protestants in the South, saying, I'm not a papist, because there's always been prejudice against Catholics in the South. That is a fact. There's no question about that. They think, to be honest with you, the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon.
Right.
In many, many, many Southern pockets. That's a fact.
Right.
That is a fact.
They'll tell you the Pope's the Antichrist.
Okay. The National Council of Churches or any other ecclesiastical source will advise me. I believe in America where a separation of church and state exists and is absolute.
It's absolute.
But here's the thing. That's
another lie.
But it's also, that's not a correct understanding of separation. But then again, it never is.
No, because again, let's talk about the way the media spins it. Okay, there is no separation of church and state. There is none. It's a lie. It's a myth that was perpetrated by the left to detach politics from religion. You cannot separate politics from religion. Let's give me a practical example. Religion says that thou shalt not kill. Okay. America for the last 50 years says it's okay to kill babies in the womb. Do you think maybe we need a little practical application of Catholic teaching in that regard? Do you? Because last time I checked, if you didn't have a Catholic voice, an authentic Catholic voice in America, particularly on the issue of abortion would be available up to the moment of birth, and there would be no question about it. It was the Catholic Church and lay Catholics in particular, along with good priests and bishops, that kept that at the forefront. But there's an example of what we're talking about. You can't just have a state that could do whatever it wants without any moral boundaries. This idea of the separation of church and state never existed. By the way, nor should it. The church is to the state as the soul is to the body. That's what the church teaches. And the body needs a soul just like the state needs the church. The state can't just do whatever it wants.
But also talking a little bit about historical fact, we had Dan Leroy on the Crusade channel. He wrote a great book, Liberty's Lions. Dan, by the way, is on EWTN's Mitch Pacwa's show. Recently, I saw an email blast out from him. Great guy, great book, gives you a lot of historical context about the prejudice that took place against Catholics in the United States of America. And again, that is why Kennedy made this speech in Houston. He's basically telling these folks, it's a Protestant association, saying, listen, I'm Catholic, but I'm not going to behave like one. And frankly, he didn't in many respects. Listen.
You're talking about Kennedy?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Another thing.
Particularly in his personal life.
But we're going to get into that a little bit. Because just because you're a baptized Catholic doesn't mean you're a practicing Catholic. And that's a lot of what American Catholicism is about. Because again, is anyone perfect? No. But here's the deal. When you say the creed at church, and there's a reason why you say it before you receive the Eucharist, you're saying, I believe in everything. And you're making that statement before you receive. It's like anything in life. Like if you were in a fraternity, any fraternity, whatever it is, you have to believe in the tenets of the fraternity. If you don't believe in the tenets of the fraternity, you can't be a member, an active member. It's the same thing.
Right.
So Kennedy says this. He promised to disregard his Catholic faith on birth control, divorce, censorship, gambling, and any other subjects.
There's a shock.
Declaring that no power or threat of punishment could cause him to decide otherwise. Now let's focus on two things. Forget about the gambling. Forget about censorship. Let's talk about birth control and divorce. These are perennial teachings of the Catholic Church. They were 200 years ago, they were 500 years ago, and they are today. Just because people who say that they're Catholic or who are baptized Catholic basically prescribe to these things does not mean they're valid.
Right.
Just because the mainstream media and the popular culture has embraced these tenets of belief doesn't mean the Catholic Church has. Just because a lot of prelates, bishops and priests and deacons and lay people for that matter, teaching their children how to behave by their actions, buy into this, doesn't mean it's valid. Now, to say this publicly as a Catholic is a scandal.
Yes.
Is a scandal. And frankly, the bishop should have called him out on it.
Well, 60 years too late. I mean, I was watching a rebroadcast of Raymond Arroyo show from last week on EWTN the world over, and he had on the Papal Posse, Father Murray, who's spot on, Robert Royal, who's spot on, and he had them on. And kind of like, they were getting into this whole thing because the bishops right now, it should be 100% of the bishops, but the vast majority of the bishops want to do something about this scandal. Really, it's what you're talking about. It's scandal. And Robert Royal pointed out that Archbishop Cordileone really needs to follow through on this in San Francisco. He credits him by saying he's been strong in his language, but now he has to be strong in his action because Pelosi, she is emblematic of what we're talking about. She's her, Biden, the rest of it. She's emblematic of what we're talking about. And not only that, Raymond Arroyo made a good point. Stop talking about refusing them communion. You need to publicly excommunicate them. You know what Raymond Arroyo brought up, by the way? Who you brought up? Bishop Rommel?
In New
Orleans. Who excommunicated the governor or the mayor, all right, because of his racism. And then you said that he eventually repented
on his
deathbed, okay? For the good of the person, you need to excommunicate them. Don't even let them show up. You're excommunicated. And if you're excommunicated, that means that even Wilton Gregory, I don't think, could give you the Eucharist if you're excommunicated. But this is what the reason why we're saying this and digressing a little bit. This is what this has all come to. I want to bring up the fact that what happened in the 1950s when you want to talk a joke. I mean, who was one of the biggest personalities on TV in the 1950s?
Sheen.
Bishop Fulton Sheen.
Won Emmys.
He won Emmys. He's Catholic. He wore his vestments on national television. He used to write on the chalkboard, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, JMJ, before he went on the chalkboard to illustrate something. There was a lot of Protestants that watched Bishop Fulton Sheen. There was a lot of people that converted to the Catholic Church because of Bishop Fulton Sheen. Okay? So the thing is, this idea that you can't be a real Catholic, a faithful Catholic, believing in church teaching and hold public office is a lie. Who is John? Let me ask you a question, Joe. If I'm a representative from Bergen County, New Jersey, and I say I'm pro-life, I'm against contraception, I'm against gay marriage and all these things.
Oh, you're not winning.
Well, no, I'm saying, but if the people vote for me, well, who am I supposed to represent? Chuck Schumer's district in New York, or am I supposed to represent the people that put me in the office? Every representative represents the worldview, for the most part, of their constituents. In other words, they would say that, well, that's not legitimate. And I don't know why. I don't know why. But anyway, we're going to keep going with this conversation, but we have to take a break on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. You're listening to The Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Racinello. This conversation is bringing us into the breach. Stick around. You don't want to go anywhere. Welcome back, everyone, to The Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Racinello. Joe, let's keep it going, Joe. Let's keep it going, because here's one thing, like I said, the language that Kennedy used in this speech is not just neutral. Did you catch that, Joe?
Well, Joe,
it's not neutral language.
He wanted to be the president.
It's overtly anti-Catholic. It's not even to say, like, in other words, I like that whole stupid argument, I'm not going to impose my faith on you. He's going so far as to say Catholic faith means nothing to me. That's really what he said.
Here's the thing. Think about it this way. How many baptized Catholics, and I'm not talking about, listen, like there are people who are a-religious who are moral people. Like, I'm not getting into like Thomas Aquinas morality. I'm talking about they take care of their kids, they follow the law, they pay their bills. They're, you know what I'm saying? They're like, they function. They're functioning adults. What I'm talking about here with this cat is basically he doesn't believe, or his life doesn't reflect what the church teaches, and he's vocalizing it. But that's most baptized Catholics in America.
Yeah.
The church is teaching. There are many people who go to church and they're not driven by what the church teaches. Even when they it's said from the pulpit. And listen, there are many good priests and there are good bishops. Don't listen. This is one thing sometimes that I think gets lost in the social media. And the way I look at priests is the way I look at everyone in life. There are good people and there are bad people. Stay away from the bad and stick with the good.
Can I interject for 1 second? I want to piggyback on what you're saying. I think the low number of faithful Catholics, and I talk to a lot of Catholics who I love them. I absolutely do. They're my friends, politically speaking, and pretty much for the culture. We agree on most things, but they also have bought into lies. Okay, I'm not judging them, but in other words, when you hear a lie, I mean, I bought into it for a long time before I had my eyes opened and the scales fell from my eyes. Okay, but the idea that you can't impose your values on them, they've bought that line. If the church taught from the pulpit, now I'm talking about the hierarchy, I'm talking about the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, okay? If they turned around and they started preaching the stone cold truth in the parishes, if they reined in the RCIA programs and the heads of those programs, both of which Joe and I were intimately involved with in the past, okay, and some of the craziness that goes on there, if they reined them in, rock solid Catholic teaching on abortion, on contraception, on divorce, and all these things. I'm just going to say this, Joe. That number of people would increase as far as those who say, no, I'm going to stick with the church and this. I quite frankly didn't know that, because I think that since the 1960s, it hasn't really been taught the way it's supposed to. Now, with social media, it's getting out there a lot more. You have a lot of people out there, a lot of good bishops, and a lot of good priests who are being very vocal out there on these issues, okay? And I think that those people would be enlightened, and I think that they would turn around. Now, many of them won't. I think many of them won't, but I think many of them will.
I agree with that. I think that the church in America lacks, a certain level of catechesis. There's no question. I think you can't even argue that point. However, I brought this up with a very faithful nun, and I took the same position Joe did, and she scolded me on it. And she basically said, no, Joe, it begins in the home. And the more I think about it, everything begins at ground zero. It's the home. People sometimes, I see it in my own parish. There are people who go to church every Sunday, but when the kids have to go to catechism, our old pastor, Father Stanley, God bless him, he's passed away. He used to make it mandatory. You had to go to church before you went to CCD. It was both. You had to. So the church was packed during the year. But in the summer, it wasn't. So what am I basically saying? Do you actually think a lot of parents send their kids to CCD because they're thinking ahead and they say, my kids, I want them to get married in the Catholic Church, so they have to have their sacraments. Well, do you think that they're going to buy into the teachings of the church when you don't take them there in the summer? It's like anything in life. You know, everyone wants a good life, but a good life doesn't magically happen. It doesn't.
Takes work.
And it's the same thing with the faith. You want to instill the faith in your children. It begins in your home. So while I agree with Joe that we could do a better job of catechesis, and I think that's unarguable, if you don't basically get the soil prepared in the home, it doesn't matter what you're saying in the pulpit. It'll be ignored. It will simply be ignored because people, the greatest homily a child hears is what he sees from his parents. And it's not being taught based upon the actions of the family.
Right.
They don't take their kids to church. I live on a street. Everyone's baptized. I'm going to be honest with you. I've lived where I lived almost 8 years, August 1st. No one goes to church on Sunday. I live with a bunch of Italians from New Jersey. They're all Catholic. Baptized, that is. They don't go to church. If you don't go to church, how are you going to expect your kids to prescribe to the teachings? They're not going to. They're not going to listen. You could have the greatest homily. You could have the greatest teacher as a priest. He could say everything perfectly. No one is going to listen. Why? Because it's not demonstrated in their home.
Right.
And that's where we're at. And that's what, in fact, you know, when we use the term American Catholicism, Joe Biden is Catholic in America.
And so was John F. Kennedy. And so is Caroline Kennedy when she got up at the Democrat National Convention and she says, I'm Catholic and I'm pro-choice. Just like Ted Lieu last week. Joe and I covered it. And I want to say, Joe, we were kind of on top of that story because it's been all over the news this past week about Ted Lieu, particularly Catholic news, okay? Covered it in. He's a Roman Catholic in America. He said, he defied the bishops. He said, I'm Catholic and I believe in a woman's right to choose. I believe in fertility treatments. I believe in the right to divorce. I believe in the right to contracept. I believe in all this stuff, same-sex marriage, of course, okay? And I defy the bishops not to withhold. I defy the bishops to withhold Holy Communion from me. That's American Catholicism. But as Joe and I say at the front line all the time, okay, for every action, there is a reaction.
Well, it produces bad fruit, Joe. That all produces bad fruit.
But bad fruit and the reaction and what we're seeing, because that's what we're seeing. And listen, the Protestants have to acknowledge this too. They can't honestly look at the American landscape and they can't honestly think because they bought into the sexual revolution too. And they consider themselves God-fearing people and right-wing people and conservative-minded people, okay? They need to see too that their rule, we have to get into this, Joe. We have to get into this, okay? We have to explode a couple things. We want to explode this idea of American Catholicism. No, Joe and I are not American Catholics. We're simply Catholics. Same with Mike Church and Barrett and many others out there. We're simply Catholics. American Catholicism is Joe Biden, okay? And by the way, I want to mention this real quick before we segue into a little bit more about the evangelicals in America, okay? Is that when you look at, let's say, when you fast forward, okay, when you fast forward from the 1960s to the 1990s, remember when Pat Buchanan was running for president?
Sure.
Okay, Pat Buchanan is a faithful Catholic. I want to break it to everybody. Pat Buchanan was the first, or let's put it like this, Donald Trump was the Pat Buchanan presidency. If you want, let's say, and Trump's not Catholic, of course, but if you want to see what for the most part a Buchanan presidency would have looked like, you'd have seen Donald Trump, okay? Buchanan, E. Michael Jones tells this story. He went to visit with Pat Robertson, okay? I forgot at which organization he was with at the time, with Ralph Reed and a lot of the evangelicals, okay? And Michael Jones basically told Pat Robertson, listen, we're going to get behind Pat Buchanan. And Mike Jones, who most of you out there at the Crusade Channel know, he's a faithful Catholic. Mike Jones said he was talking to Pat Robertson. Pat Robertson was very receptive. And here comes Ralph Reed walking down the hallway. And Pat Robertson walked over to Ralph Reed. He said, Ralph, we're supporting Pat Buchanan, right? We're going to support Pat Buchanan. He says, and E. Michael Jones says, Ralph Reed's face dropped. Because evangelicals don't want a Catholic president. Because Buchanan would not have been John F. Kennedy, Joe Racinello. He would not have been John F. Kennedy. He would have been an authentic Catholic president.
Joe, you have no chance. Just like, to be honest, if you are an authentic Catholic, take Rick Santorum. Is he perfect? No. Again, no one's perfect. But Rick Santorum has a crap load of kids. He is a Catholic. I've walked behind him in the March for Life in D.C. Not that that makes you a Catholic either. But my point is, if you ask me, he seems to be a Catholic. I don't hang out with them. I don't live with them. I don't drink with them.
Seems to be living his faith.
All right. There's no chance he'll be elected. Just like an Orthodox Jew will never get elected in this country.
But what did you say?
Ever.
But what did you say? What do you say all the time, specifically about when you're talking about, first of all, the tide is, in my opinion, I think Joe agrees with me, indicators that are out there. The tide is turning against abortion. And remember, I brought this out on the show before, okay? Charles Krauthammer and Glenn Beck, neither of whom were Catholic, are Catholic or were Catholic. Krauthammer passed away. He was a Jew. And Glenn Beck, who's a Mormon who grew up Catholic, okay? Both of them said without the Catholic Church, abortion, the issue itself would have gone away. And he says if there ever is going to be a resolution to that issue, it'll be because of the Catholic Church, okay? When all of you good evangelicals out there, God-fearing people, I'm not make it clear to you, I am not judging your sincere love for Jesus Christ, but you need to put down certain golden calves. And one of them is this primacy of conscience. Because you know where primacy of conscience gets us? To the boat we're in now, where gender ideology is rammed down our throats, where somebody like Ted Lieu, who says he's Catholic, could say the things he says, and Biden and Pelosi. This is where primacy of conscience gets us. God's law is the law, and God's law is primary. Your conscience is subordinate to God's law. If your conscience, Joe Racinello, correct me if I'm wrong, you're better at this than I am. If your conscience is not formed to God's will and God's law, you have a malformed conscience.
Well, not only
Therefore,
that,
conscience cannot be primed.
To be truthful with you, not just that, but you'll have consequences of that in your life, because God is trying to gear you to himself. And there's friction in your life when you're not acting in accordance to the natural law. It's God's way of gearing you in line. That's how it works. But everything you're talking about, Joe, has everything to do with two words: authority and obedience. Two words that Americanism doesn't mesh with. I am my own person and I am an individual. I get news for you, people. If you want to go to heaven, it's God's way, because it's God's house. Trust me. The theme song of hell is I Did It My Way. Do you know, and I have heard this at funerals in a Catholic church, I have heard this said, he lived his life on his terms. Dude, that's the path to hell. Your terms doesn't take you to heaven. It's God's terms that takes you to heaven. That's the way it is, guys. And I got news for you. That's a perennial teaching of the Catholic Church.
But as you've always said, American Catholicism is an inch wide or was it an inch deep and a mile wide? That's the same with American Christianity in general. No, it's okay on certain fundamental things, okay? Let me credit our evangelical brothers and sisters, okay? In other words, on abortion, okay? They're right on abortion. Most of them, people like Alveda King, all right? She's, I guess, Southern Baptist or Protestant of some kind, evangelical. She obviously works very closely with Father Frank Pavone in the pro-life movement. There's many good evangelicals. They're right on life. But here's the problem. They don't get to the root cause because just like liberal Catholics, I'm not excluding liberal Catholics, okay? Liberal Catholics and many evangelicals have bought into what is the root cause of the problem and where all this comes from and why, by the way, all of this came to be. What do you think those ministers wanted to hear from JFK? I think it comes down to two things, by the way. One of which, and you'll agree with me on this, is sex. One of them is contraception. They don't want to hear anything about any prohibitions on contraception whatsoever. They're as much in favor of Griswold versus Connecticut as the ACLU was, okay? And that's what they wanted to hear. So you have to get to the root cause, the contraceptive mentality, which led to the destruction of families. Joe talked about families earlier, big families. Even Catholics don't have big families anymore, Joe Racinello. They don't. Why? Because they've all bought into this idea. Well, I can only have 3 kids. Tell that to my grandmother. She had 8 kids. They prospered. Your family, your grandmother had 17 kids. They prospered. They made it in America. They didn't grow up dirt poor, eating mud pies in the street
thing is,
like they do in Calcutta.
Joe, but people, to have that, you see, Christ says to you, you're not going to have an easy life. He says that. Again, I referenced this on last week's show on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. He said to Peter, when you get older, someone else will dress you and you will go where you don't want to go. You see, the battle between the flesh and basically the spirit is ongoing. Who wants to die to themselves? No one. It goes against our nature. And to do those things mean you're going to die to yourself. If you have a number of children, you're not going to vacation where you want. You're not going to live in the house that you want. You're not going to drive the car that you want. You're not going to eat the food that you want. You're not going to send your kids to the college that they want, frankly, because you don't have the money. Not everyone is rich. You don't have the money. So what is the answer? I will not serve. I will not bend my knee because I am trying to have heaven on earth here. You see, it all comes down to that. I've said this many times on many shows. I've taught pre-K classes, me and my wife. And when I look out and I see these young people getting married, I say to them straight out, what is the goal of your marriage? So one of the first things I say, I know what the goal is. I'm asking them what I want to hear it from them. They don't say it. I want to be rich. I want to be rich. That's not the goal of marriage. Mm-hmm. The goal of marriage and the goal of life is to get into heaven. And we only do it God's way. And again, it goes against our nature. And Americanism says, no, I will have my wonderful life now. And because all good people go to heaven, whatever good means, I could have both.
Even Jesus said, why do you call me good? We need to stop doing that in America. We need to stop doing that as people. I don't want anybody to call me a good man. That's not false humility. I'm saying that so truthfully. Don't call me a good man, okay? Because I'm not gonna judge myself to be a good man. All I know is this: without some moral boundaries, objective moral boundaries, we have. And this is the result, and this is why we're talking about JFK and all his shenanigans when he went to the South and gave this speech, okay? And talk about other, so-called Catholics now, okay? We have basically the wild, wild West. Well, my conscience, your conscience, don't worry about it. Joe Racinello, we're all pro-life. We believe in capitalism, and we all go to heaven. Isn't that the way to get to heaven? I read that, I think, in the Gospel of St. John.
The way to get to heaven.
If you're pro-life and you're pro-business, you go to heaven. I think that was in John 6.
I think that was in, what's it called? John. I think that's, what's his face? The guy who runs JP Morgan. You get rich and you go to heaven.
Right, you get rich and you go to heaven.
I mean, but someone said in the chat room, and I want to address it, you don't have to have a big family to be faithful. You're right, actually, because some people can have children. Stuff happens, but you have to be open to life. Yeah. And here's another thing to get into heaven. You have to die to yourself. Christ said that very clearly. You have to die to yourself. That's a white martyrdom. And you do that many ways. Having a family is a way to do it. You die to yourself. Selflessness equals love. Mm-hmm. You see, that's the way to get to heaven. And here's the thing. Americanism does not comport with that.
Let's talk about another reason real quick at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Remember, we're doing a subscriber push, okay? Just a Crusade channel just added Kennedy Hall to the roster along with Brother Andre Marie, Rick Barrett, the front line with Joe and Joe. Was it Dave Simpson does the money show from a Catholic point of view? Obviously, the King Dude, Mike Church. Go on crusadechannel.com, hit listen free, and listen for free. And we're convinced you're going to want to be a subscriber. Mike Church and the Crusade channel cannot get taken down by YouTube or Facebook or anybody else. He set it up so that he's protected and he can speak the truth. And we're proud, Joe and I, to be a part of that. Okay. But let's talk about another reason why, Joe Racinello. And this ties into something that we talk about on the show. Okay. I think one of the commentators out there said that the bald guy's angry. Okay. I get angry at a lot of things. Sorry. And somebody, thank God, in the chat room basically told him, says, I think it's passion. I like to think it's passion. I'm passionate about these things. The other thing is this. I'm sorry. Your right-wing Chamber of Commerce evangelical Christians, they're asking the Biden regime to bring in foreign workers. And one of the things that let's say, for argument's sake, evangelicals and Protestants in general don't want to hear about is the protection of workers' rights. And that's something that goes back to the social compendium of the Catholic Church to the late 19th century, starting with Leo XIII, starting with Rerum Novarum, reiterated 40 years later in Quadragesimo Animo by Pope Pius XI, and reiterated by Pope John Paul II. Okay? Consumerism. Not free markets. They did not condemn free markets, Joe Racinello. Consumerism, okay, is not desirable, while at the same time they condemned communism and socialism. But if you turn around and you start talking about workers' rights, wages, let's call it, like we get back to Pat Buchanan and Donald Trump, protectionism, America first, convincing business owners that you have to pay your workers a living wage, a family wage. Not a minimum wage like the left throws that around. A family wage where the man can go out and make enough money to raise the children, to provide for his family, to provide for everything. Joe, what did we cover a couple weeks ago on the show in the construction industry? What was the wages 40 years ago?
It was like $40
an hour.
Now it's 11.
Now it's 11. All right? Yeah. In other words, that's another reason why you don't want, why a lot of people don't want to hear from the Catholic Church when it comes to politics in America and economics in America, because the faithful Catholic says, hold it. Firmly believe in the right to private property and to run your business, and a profitable business at that, or else if you're not making a profit, you don't have a business. But you have workers and you have obligations to your workers. And a lot of people, Joe Racinello, they don't want to hear that either.
But let's get back to Kennedy a little bit. Kennedy basically sold out in this speech the Catholic Church. He sold them out. He basically said, listen, I am a baptized Catholic, but guess what? The church is not going to drive the way I think. And here's the deal. Listen, if you are Catholic, you have to be Catholic on Sunday, on Saturday, on Monday, and that's the way to get into heaven. Period. End of story. That may mean you can't become the president, but that's okay. What did Christ say in the gospel? It's better. Is it better to lose your soul, to gain the world and lose your soul? I mean, people, I'll be honest with you. I'll just speak for myself. I've been out of college since 1992. You know, I have an MBA. There were many things that have been put in front of me I couldn't do, because my conscience wouldn't basically allow me to do it. I couldn't do it. Now, that's a choice, right? We all make choices. Life is about choices. Choices. And that's the way it is. You can't have both in life. You will not have heaven and the world. They don't comport with each other. It's oil and water. It's oil and water. That's why, as a Catholic, we're not supposed to, and this is getting back in line with Kennedy, go along with the culture. You should stand out as a light. You shouldn't even have to, I'm going to be honest with you, shouldn't even have to open your mouth and say you're Catholic. People should know it by the way you behave, by the way you spend your money.
I would agree with you on that. But the only thing is, Joe, given our current circumstances, and that's what we're talking about tonight, the bad fruit of everything that went on from the time of Kennedy's speech is the fact that you're right. Under ordinary circumstances, you're absolutely right. I'm not disagreeing with it at all. By example, that's what you show to other people. But at this moment in time, the necessity is to do that and to open your mouth. You're going to stand out. I would dare say, Joe, and again, we follow social media a lot, okay? And I think that the people that are gaining the most traction out there, thank God, are faithful Catholics, because we're speaking like them and they're speaking like us, because they're saying, I'm tired of this nonsense. No, I'm not. We're intelligent guys, Joe. In other words, I don't have a PhD, and neither does Joe, but we're intelligent guys, okay? We can look at the root causes of the problem. We look at history. We look at how we've gotten to this point. We all need to do that so we can understand and then make the necessary adjustments as a people, as a nation, to get back on a moral footing in this country. Can't kill babies anymore. Can't have boys going into girls' rooms. Can't tell me if I believe marriage is between one man and one woman, I'm going to lose my job. In other words, and I'm sorry, many others, Joe, outside the Catholic Church are not fighting the fight we fight. And my point to you is that a lot of people out there in the Catholic social media world, the faithful Catholic social media world, we're starting to gain traction. A lot of non-Catholics, Joe, are listening. They are. Well, I see the mess.
Ultimately, I think they're going to listen more because none of this is going to work. I've mentioned this on other shows that
let's take a break.
Okay.
Let's come back and then we'll finish up and then we'll get into some more stories after the break. You're listening to the Frontline with Joe and Joe Pasillo, Joe Racinello on the Crusade channel. Stick around. We're not going anywhere. Welcome back, everyone, to the Frontline with Joe and Joe Pasillo, Joe Racinello. Way in the breach on the Crusade channel. Always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. The last live radio station standing. Joe, before the break, you wanted to make a point.
No, but basically, you know, ultimately, and I was going to reference Ratzinger's radio address, you know, all of this is bearing bad fruit. It's bearing bad fruit. And eventually, in accordance to what Ratzinger said in 1969, people will look at what has happened to society, and they will look at basically people who do things according to the natural law and God's teaching. And frankly, they're going to say, why is your life functioning and mine isn't? You see, here's the thing. The laws of God, I used to say this when I used to teach within the Catholic Church, they apply to you whether you agree with them or not. It's like gravity because God made everybody. Everybody. It applies to you whether you agree with it or not. And when you don't follow it, there are consequences. We'll use, to be honest with you, we'll use the marriage example. If you don't live a sacramental marriage, why did God make marriage a sacrament? Because it's hard. Because marriage is hard. Know why? People always say, why do people get divorced? One word, selfishness. Love requires selflessness. And that goes against our very nature. I have 4 children. One of the first words out of a child's mouth is this: mine, mine. And we spend our whole life trying to get rid of that phrase, that word. To have a good marriage, you have to die to yourself. Marriage isn't 50-50. It's 100%, 100%. And it's hard. So God said, I'm going to make it a sacrament because I am going to get, and what's the definition of a sacrament? I'm not going to give you the textbook definition. I'm going to give you the Jersey definition. It gives you grace and it elevates your nature and it helps you. So what happens when you don't live a sacramental marriage? You struggle. More so even when you do. And a lot of times you get divorced.
Right.
Because you need the grace. Because God knew that. He built it in. Because he's like, listen, to get married, again, you don't magically have a good life. Everyone wants a good life. I want a good life. They see people, oh, they're married 60 years. How beautiful. All their kids. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. You think that magically happened? How many times did they wake up in the middle of the night, their kid's puking? How many times they get up in the middle of the night to pick up their kid because they did something and their car broke down on the highway? How many times that they sacrifice? You're
reminding me of my poor father.
I'm
when
just
I put him
saying.
No, you're right. You're right. And again, we back up everything we say with statistics because it's important. We're not just throwing it out there. Catholics have as high, and you've heard this before from us, and we're going to say it again. It bears repeating, okay, because it's true. Catholics have as high a divorce rate as anybody else out there. Jews, liberals, secularists, evangelical, just as high amongst faithful Catholics. Being defined, by the way, married couples, being defined as going to mass at least once a week on Sundays, going to confession at least once a month, and praying every day. The divorce rate is no more than. Go ahead, Joe.
It's the contraception piece. That's the divorce rate's 3%.
And do not contracept.
It's 3%.
3%.
3%.
There is the glue. Adhere to the law of God. And what does God do? He makes what's hard. Joe said it flat out. Marriage is hard. Nobody's painting some Norman Rockwell painting over marriage. We know it's hard because it requires sacrifice. And nobody likes to sacrifice less than I do. That's a full confession right there. And nobody knows that better than God and my wife. But because of the grace that God gives you, you know what happens? Because everybody's, Joe, you know as well as I do, all you good people out there, you know it as well as we do, okay? You're going to have hard times. You're not going to avoid everyone. No matter who you are. Your bank book is, and I don't care how fat that Mercedes is in your driveway and how big your house is. you will have hard
People
times.
get sick.
And getting over that requires God's grace. And if you want God's grace, you know what you do? You stay close to him. You stay close to him.
And
you don't deviate.
Absolutely.
From that.
And that's the deal. And getting back to my analogy of gravity, the laws of God apply to you whether you want to believe in them or not, just like gravity. You don't believe in gravity? Jump off the roof. When you hit the cement, you're going to believe in gravity. Do it again. You don't believe in it? Do it again. It's the same thing. It bears bad fruit. I learned that at 22 years old. My way doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Can I ask you a question? You're making it personal about your own life. But can we not then take that and apply that to America in general? America is falling apart. Why are we having this conversation at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online? Our nation that we love, we're a baby killing nation, along with 6 other countries that allow baby killing up to the moment of birth. I love America. I love the concept of America, but that's not what we live in. Okay. America is falling apart for the reason that Joe just said. If you do not form yourself as an individual or as a society and form it to the law of God, okay, this is the disaster you get. And the reason why we have a show is because there's always, and we're going to talk about more of it tonight, there's one disaster after another. And the reason why is because we told God to leave. Leave. We don't want you here. But again, it's kind of like, it's a little weird because we say we're a God-fearing nation, but yet when it comes to personal decisions that we make and societal decisions, we don't act in accord with his will and his law. And we all know his law because we all know the 10 Commandments. And yet we don't want to bend our knee and we don't want to be obedient. And that's why we're living in disaster, Joe Racinello. And then
everyone thinks they're going to go to heaven. Everyone then thinks they're going to go to heaven. I got news for you. The trouble, this is an interview we just did this weekend with Dr. Paul Shalou of Catholic University talking about suffering. It's that suffering then that basically is supposed to guide you back onto the lane. But frankly, we just double down and triple down. Mm-hmm. And let's get back to Kennedy a little bit.
Go ahead.
I mean, why did America buy into the lie of the Kennedys? They called it Camelot. Camelot's a fairy tale. They were good looking. They were rich. They were robber barons. Frankly, Joe Kennedy stole from America. He was the head of the SEC. And when America went under in the Great Depression, he shorted the market.
He made millions.
Which means he bet that the market was going to go down and made millions. That's how the Kennedy fortune was built, on his shorting of the market. So we buy into the lie. Isn't that what we see in Hollywood? Isn't that what we see in every department store when you check out People magazine? Oh, everybody's good looking. Everybody's rich. Oh, I want my kids. Oh, they're all going to go to Ivy League schools. Everyone's going to be dressed like a little preppy little boy and girl. Good looking 250-pound boy, middle linebacker. Getting 1,600 on his SATs, gonna go play at Brown University. Life doesn't work like that. That's the lie. So people, what do? We bought into this lie. We bought into it hook, line, and sinker. Oh, they were great. They were Catholic. You know something? If you're in a car, if you're in a driveway, does it make you a car? If you go into the ocean, does it make you a fish? I got news for you. Just because you're baptized doesn't make you a practicing Catholic, and it doesn't make you receive the benefits of the church. Mm-hmm. To receive the benefits of the Catholic Church, many people go to church. They say, "Oh, I'm bored. Why do you go to church?" My first question to you: when's the last time you went to confession? You know what happens when you don't go to confession? It's like a hose that's filled with mud. The water doesn't come out because it's clogged. In order to receive the grace, you got to get the mud out of the hose. Does that mean you're perfect? No. But what it means is you allow the grace of God into your life. Once you do that, your life changes. But here's the important part. People don't want to change. They don't want to change.
Isn't that the story of humanity? Is that people don't want to change? You know, the Jews in the Old Testament, you know what I mean? They didn't want to change. And When God warned so many people in the Old Testament, you have to change. In other words, whether it be the Canaanites or whether it be those in Sodom and Gomorrah, you got to change, you got to change, you got to change. And God's always patient. But at one point, but people just, it's always that I, me. And we're all selfish to a degree. Nobody's denying that. Okay. I'd be a liar if I said I didn't act selfishly at times. But there's a difference between falling into that and trying to do better than embracing your selfishness. And it seems like that's a lot of what we're going through in America. And that's because we have not just a watered down Catholicism, but just a watered down version of Christianity.
It's the culture.
It's a corrupt culture, and we should move on, Joe. But I would say this, and this is for further reading at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. So we'll give you all for further reading. If you want to talk about real Catholics, we spoke to Austin Ruse a couple of weeks ago, who said, and we didn't know this. He said de Tocqueville wrote in Democracy in America that America would go one of two ways: pantheism or Catholicism. And obviously, it seems now we have many, many false gods in America. So it seems we're on the road to pantheism. But Catholics, faithful Catholics, are fighting the good fight. That's one of the reasons why we're here, Joe and I. That's why King Dude is here at the Crusade channel, and many others out there that are pounding the drum. They're beating the drum, saying, we're screaming from the rooftops. We're telling you what's wrong with this country. We're telling you exactly how this country has veered off on the wrong path. But real quick, there have been great Catholic heroes. And for further reading, we would tell you to look up men like Charles Carroll. Now, Christopher Bedford points this out. Men like Charles Carroll of Carrollton, his cousin John, John's older brother Daniel, Father William Corby, who was the second founder of Notre Dame. And these are examples of great Americans, amongst whom is not John F. Kennedy, nor the Kennedy family, nor Pelosi, nor Ted Lieu, nor Joe Biden. I would tell the media no. When it rained the day of Ted Kennedy's funeral, that was not tears from heaven. That was not tears from heaven crying for him. Okay, I have prayed for Ted Kennedy because. Again, I know that sounds judgmental to a lot of people out there, but I prayed for him because that dude went to his deathbed and I don't know whether he repented or not, but this is the type of nonsense. Tears from heaven, a guy who supported baby killing up until the time he died, okay? But tears from heaven, that's what you get. No, they're real Catholic heroes in American history, okay? And you should all go and look them up.
Well, the road to heaven, and maybe we just ended on this, many times isn't like the good-looking God. That doesn't mean good-looking people don't go to heaven or rich people don't go to heaven. But if you're rich, God requires a lot from you. That is also biblical. That's another misconception of Catholicism. Read the Social Compendium of the Catholic Church. It makes it very clear. Also, I never forget this image in my head. I'll never forget it. I went to a priest's 40th anniversary mass. He was a good priest. All types of people were there. And I remember watching a married couple who had a number of children walk up the aisle to receive. The woman was heavily pregnant. She had like a kid by the hand carrying one kid. The guy looked like he rolled down a hill. His shirt was a mess. Life was hard for them. Many times the road to heaven is a struggle. Christ says that very clearly. It doesn't mean that you're going to be on the cover of People magazine. Most people who go to heaven are unknown to the world. In fact, probably 99.6% of them, but they're faithful. And life is hard. Christ says that in the gospel. It will be hard for you. You will weep now, but later you will what's it called? Feel joy. That's biblical. It doesn't look good to follow your faith. That's what keeps people from it, because life is a show. Isn't that what it's all about? Social media. Let me show you what I'm eating. Let me show you my new house. Let me show you my car. Yeah. But that's not the road to heaven. Right. Christ didn't have a pillow to lie upon. He was a homeless itinerant preacher. He was born into a blue-collar family. His family did not have a hospital to have him basically, I don't even know if they had hospitals, but his mother gave birth to him in a barn. That's not the road to heaven. I'm just telling you, I'm not there, but I'm telling you that. The road to heaven is sacrificial. The road to heaven is selflessness, whether you're rich, poor, smart, or ignorant. And here's another thing in America. We've been given a lot, because I have seen people who are poor. God is going to say, I put you here, Joe Racinello. I didn't put you in Cambodia. What did you do? Believe me, he's going to say, I gave you an education. I gave you a faith. I gave you a place where you have a good life. What did you do? Don't think that question's not going to be posed to all of us. And here's the deal. That's why we bought into the Camelot bullcrap. Because everyone wants their cake and eat it too. It doesn't work that way. It didn't work for Jesus Christ. They nailed him to a tree.
On that note, let's move forward. Let's get into some individual stories. We would recommend going to read the full article at the Federalist, Christopher Bedford. And again, I mean, we have to get it straight. What direction this country is going in, because the direction it's going in right now, it's not doing any. In fact, Joe, you mentioned looking good. Doesn't look good at all right now. So you're at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Racinello, way in the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air, always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, we're doing a subscriber push, so go on the website, crusadechannel.com, hit listen free, and listen to all the station's content, and we're convinced that you're going to want to be a subscriber at the end of the day, and we would encourage you to do so because big tech cannot take down the Crusade channel, because that's the way Mike Church set it up. So let's move into some politics, the manifestation of all this bad fruit. So we're going to, the big thing is obviously we fear with the Biden regime, all right, and the fact that, Nancy Pelosi has a majority of 6 seats in the House. Ooh, that's an overwhelming majority. And the Senate is split, okay? So we're thinking Puerto Rico is going to become a state, D.C. is going to become a state, they're going to ramp through everything they want. Well, evidently not so. Not so, and it's coming from places you might not have thought of. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe.
What was his name? Tronsky? Andrew Tronsky? Is this guy?
Yeah, from Life News.
Yeah,
yep.
He basically was writing about Sinema, Kristen Sinema. Basically, she reaffirmed her position to abolishing the 60-vote Senate filibuster, rebuffing progressives who have decried the legislative rule and called for its removal. Sinema, she's a Democrat from Arizona, argued that scrapping the Senate rule would erode democracy's guardrails, writing in the Washington Post that doing so would lead the nation to lose much more than we would gain. I would agree with her. This is a direct quote from her. If anyone expected me to reverse my position because my party now controls the Senate, they should know that my approach to legislating in Congress is the same, whether in the minority or the majority. She continued, the filibuster is essential to ensure moderation and compromise, and a necessary safeguard against wild, sweeping policy by the majority over objections from the minority. Actually, Joe, listen, we may not agree on in lockstep with her on everything, we don't. But I'm going to tell you this: that is some wisdom right there.
If somebody told that to Harry Reid back in 2013, all right, you wouldn't have had Chuck Schumer threatening Supreme Court justices on the steps of the Supreme Court. Okay. Now, again, we thought we had some victories with Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh. I don't know. That's a conversation for another time at the front line with Joe and Joe. But nonetheless, okay, somebody should have said what Kristen Sinema is saying now to Harry Reid when he did away with the filibuster on federal judges, because then Mitch McConnell just extended that to Supreme Court justices. And said, what am I doing? I'm just doing what Harry Reid did. She's trying to tell her own party. And something tells me she knows maybe a little bit about her own tenuous position in Arizona.
Probably.
Right, exactly. She wants to be a senator. She likes being a senator. So guess what? She wants to ingratiate herself to the people of Arizona, which is essentially a red state. I'm not buying all the nonsense that Arizona could go either way. I'm just not, okay? But here's the thing. She wants to be a senator. She's warning the Democrats, don't do this because you probably are not going to be in the majority in 2022. So if you do this now, number one, as soon as the Republicans come in, they reverse everything you did, and they're going to have the numbers to do it, okay? And number two, they're going to do what they want with a 51 let's say, a unified 51-49 majority or better. She's being, again, we don't agree with her probably on much. She's being prudent. She's actually being prudent, which I don't think you could find that, Joe Racinello, in the Democrat Party right now. A little prudential judgment, okay, when it comes to how things should work. She's telling her party, you're not going to be in power forever, so don't do this. It's actually not a very good idea at all. That's what
absolutely, 100%. And listen, the founders on many counts were spot on. You know, it's about, listen, they knew that this country is full of different people. It's, what is it? Pluralism, unity. What's the phrase? Unity in plurality, e pluribus unum.
E pluribus unum, out of many one.
There we go. So, I mean, listen, obviously there are a lot of different people in this country. And frankly, you're never going to have it one way. It just doesn't. There are things, listen, that we're not going to compromise on. Please don't misunderstand me. You know, like with abortion, with same-sex marriage. But there are things I'll talk to you about. I'll talk to you about immigration. I could talk to like a Democrat on immigration. Let's talk about it.
A proper view of immigration.
No, but like
not an ideological
let's
argument.
But my point is, we can give and take. We could talk about economics.
Right.
We can talk about taxation. You know, and this is the idea. The founders, to be honest with you, knew this. They had foresight, and they knew that there would have to be compromise. And they also know that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's why they put the filibuster in, Joe Pasillo. And frankly,
yeah, I think
to get rid of it's a bad idea,
yeah,
and she gets it.
We have to take a break. You're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Racinello, Way in the Breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air, always online at crusadechannel.com. Stick around. We got a lot more conversation for you. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Racinello, Way in the Breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. So Kristen Sinema obviously gets it, okay? And not for nothing, she wrote the op-ed, right? What'd you say, Joe? She wrote in the Washington Post, right?
Correct.
She voted it on it, or she wrote it the day before the Senate voted on advancing that voting rights bill that they're trying to basically nationalize, you know, their wish list. Let's call it
Correct.
like that.
It's for the People Act.
For the People Act. You know, Screw the People Act is really what it should be called. Okay?
We got to break this down. This is important.
Yeah, so go ahead.
No, basically, this is in life news. Senate Republicans successfully defeated the radical Democratic bill to take over the nation's election process in a way that could allow more election fraud than ever before and pave the way for making taxpayers fund abortion, Democrat candidates with taxpayer dollars. Senate Republicans stopped the For the People Act, a federal takeover of elections, by preventing Democrats from getting 60 votes to move the legislation forward, or Republicans stuck together. Now,
Republicans stuck together.
But this is what I want to say,
Go ahead.
you know, because obviously the mainstream media is going to spin this. It's even the name, For the People. Let's break down what this is all about, okay? Basically, in this bill, it allows unlimited ballot harvesting. That is not for the people. Another thing it does, it undermines voter ID laws.
To me, that one's a no-brainer.
That is a no-brainer, and that is so illegal aliens vote. It has nothing to do with the African-American population.
Yeah, they want you to walk in. You know, like when you walk into the voting booth and you go up, and the lady, usually it's like an old blue-haired lady.
Sure.
Excuse me. And she has the book there, and you got your name on one side, and you got a sign, and they match the signature, and you show your ID. They basically want to make it where you walk in with your croissant from Dunkin' Donuts, okay, with with your medium coffee, or your Starbucks, and say, hey, you know, I want to vote. Now, what's your name? John Smith.
Where do you live?
Where do you live? Down the block.
I live over there.
I live over there. I live down the block, you know, over there. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, you can go vote right over here. Oh, just sign right here, John Smith. Not matching it with anything. Don't show ID. Nothing. That is the way we're going to treat.
Is that for the People Act?
Is that for the people, or is that not screw the people? You see, because when John Smith in that scenario goes in to vote, he's fraudulently, by the way, he's screwing me out of my vote. He's negating my vote. So that's not for the people. That's screw the people.
And here's another thing, which I want to be very clear. I want everyone to vote. We never have, how many people? 300 million, 350 million in the US?
Something like that. 350.
No,
let's call it.
Sadly, not everyone votes in this country. Everyone should vote. I want everyone to vote. I'm not for gerrymandering electoral districts either. I want a fair election. I am not for any of that. I want everyone to vote. Everyone. And when that happens, by the way, you don't have what happened on January 6th. You see, you want it free and fair. And For the People Act, like I said, based upon these two facts, a couple, well, not just these two, but there's others. Ballot harvesting, unlimited. No, doesn't work that way. ID laws, you have to have controls. I want it very easy. It should be very easy to vote for everyone who is a citizen and is 18 years old. But here's the deal. This is not for the people. This was a manipulation. Also, they're trying to federalize the election.
Yeah, so they want to override. They want to override what is in the Constitution, the authority of the state legislatures. State legislatures say what goes on with elections in the individual states. That's the bottom line. Now, in a national election, the federal government could have something to say, but a very small something to say. In other words, there might be some safeguards, but at the end of the day, the state legislature is the one that makes the laws within each individual state as to the manner and place of elections. That's under no uncertain terms. That is the plain language of the Constitution.
And why is that? Because if the federal government controls the election, power can control the outcome. All the different states means that the power is spread out. Also, what's in this law is they want to use taxpayer dollars to fund election campaigns. Sorry, I don't want to fund Bob Menendez in New Jersey with my taxpayer dollars. I'm sorry.
And I have a feeling that part of this, and one of the reasons why they want to do this, is because they want to try to get around the Citizens United. It's not in the article, but it just struck me. If you remember the Citizens United case, where basically you could give money, where PACs could give money to a presidential campaign because it's an expression of their free speech. Okay, and if I give money to a PAC, then I want that PAC to give that money to a particular candidate, whoever it might be. Okay, so and the Supreme Court said that that's completely legitimate and told the federal government to beat it, to kick rocks. Okay, so I have a feeling this would affect that too, because if you don't have private donations to a campaign and you have public donation or public money going for a campaign, well, then that does away with, again, my freedom of expression. And in this case, freely expressing myself through who I'm giving my money to, okay, as far as political candidates is concerned, whether it's individually or whether it's through a PAC. So I know it's going to have an effect, Joe Racinello, on Citizens United too. But there's a lot of people chiming in on this, because what they're also trying to do is they're trying to squash individual voices on individual issues. So Marjorie Denenfelser, all right, I think she's Susan B. Anthony list, okay? She basically came out and she's Susan B. Anthony, she told LifeSite News, this is a direct attack on our nation's democratic election process, a complete override of election laws, and it makes it easier to commit election fraud and dilute millions of pro-life voices. Election integrity is an issue of vital strategic importance to the pro-life movement. Absolutely. We don't want them, Joe Racinello. Here's the bottom line. I don't want them federalizing an election that should be dealt with on the state and local level. I just don't.
But here's another problem. Again, this is the reality. It's going to be spun as this was racist. It's already begun. You see, the press controls the narrative, and they control, frankly, a lot of the people of America, because they're broadcasting this message. I've already seen Bill Clinton on the talk shows saying, like, basically throwing out what the Republicans are doing. They're suppressing the vote.
Right.
They already sent out Obama. They know what they're doing, and what they're going to say, and this is where violence, if you ask me, is going to result in this. They're going to say that you are a racist, that because you supported this, you don't want African Americans to vote. I'm going to tell you right now, based upon a couple of points, why I'm not for this, and has nothing to do with African Americans. One, I think you should have to show an ID when you vote. Sorry, that doesn't make me a racist. Two, I don't want my taxpayer dollars to go towards electoral campaigns. I think that's a valid position. That doesn't make me a racist.
Mhm.
3, I am not for unlimited ballot harvesting. Sorry, that doesn't make me a racist. Therefore, I don't support the bill. But you see, that's not what's going to be communicated to the people through the press. They're going to put this out there. And when the Democrats get destroyed in 2022, they're going to point to this. They're going to say that the Republicans suppressed the vote, that they are racist, that this is why they lost, when they lost because their ideas stink.
Right.
They straight up and down do. And it is going to further throw kerosene on the fire in the culture, and there will be violence, and it's about hatred. It's about power.
And it's the fire that they started, Joe Racinello.
And
I'm sorry, it's the fire that they started.
And here's another thing. I'm convinced of this. They want another January 6th.
Oh, of course
event.
they do.
You see, they want to start trouble and have the National Guard come out and squash it, because then they'll wave the look at the fascists, look at what they did.
Right.
This is stirring the pot, and they know what they're doing.
Well, because they're Marxists. I mean, underlying it all, they want the violence. I mean, the Democrats are a Marxist party. They're not a Democrat party. Not that the Democrat Party was ever anything good. Okay, we all know that from their history. Thanks to our own efforts and people like Dinesh D'Souza, who have gone out of their way to point out the sordid history of that godforsaken party. Okay, but they're not even that anymore. They're beyond that. They're Marxists, and they support violent Marxists. They support violent Marxist groups, the leaders of whom own multi-million-dollar houses on both coasts, like Patrisse Cullors from Black Lives Matter. Okay, being a true Marxist, speaking for the people and living in the lap of luxury. So they're Marxists. They want the violence. They would like nothing more than for guys like Joe and me and about 300 other guys like us to go out and get into a clash with Antifa. They would love nothing more than that. We're not falling for it. We are absolutely not falling for that.
But even if the federal government does it, you see, like, something has to change. Like, just like COVID happened and it was exploited, you see, something has to change.
Mm-hmm.
Because, frankly, they're going to, if you ask me, there is going to be violence. Because, and again, it's the press. It's the press. Listen, even our show, we're shadow banned on Facebook. We were getting up to 1,000 views a week on Facebook alone. On Facebook alone, we get a little over 100.
Right.
People have told us, from local people to people in Wisconsin, Barbara Farley, who's been listening to us for years, said, I don't get a notice anymore.
Right. Same on YouTube.
It's there. They are. It's a fact. They don't. You see, listen, this is the way it is right now. It's sad. But just like the COVID situation, something can happen and it could flip. It could flip. And that's why we were talking about the filibuster. You have to have vision in life. Politics goes from one side of the fence to the other.
Right.
They don't see it that way. Listen, I'll be honest with you. If you actually get a guy who becomes president, who actually does what Trump said, because Trump didn't act on everything that he said.
No, he didn't.
If you get that, you're in trouble.
Right.
You're in big trouble.
Absolutely. So we have to be careful, very careful about that. As Americans, and again, knowing what they're up to, we know exactly what they're up to. We have to be careful about not reacting with violence. I will go back, as I always will, when the Columbus statues were coming down, all right, and getting thrown into the Ohio River or whatever. Nutley, New Jersey. I thought that was a great example of what we need to do. All right, a bunch of guys that do look like Joe and I. All right, a bunch of Italian Americans on Franklin Avenue in Nutley, New Jersey. They stood in front of the bust of Columbus with Black Lives Matter coming down the street, and they didn't do anything violent. That's all they said was, "You're not taking down the statue." They screamed, they hollered, they called them racist. The cops were there. They called them racist and all that stuff. And these guys very simply said, the statue's not coming down, so you might as well go home. All right. And you know what happened after the screaming and the crying and you're racist and blah, blah, blah? They went home. They marched back down Franklin Avenue. They marched back down towards Newark, and they went home. That's what we have to do. Non-violently, but forcefully stand our ground, and say what Joe and I have said on this show for 3 years now, okay? The answer is no. Joe mentioned children before. Children, because that's what we're dealing with this leftist party that they call themselves Democrats, okay? Children need to be told no. The danger is that children under the age of 8 don't have any reason. This party of so-called sophisticated people and adults act like a bunch of unreasonable children. And what do you do with unreasonable children? You stand your ground and you say, the answer is no. And that's what we have to say right across the board. Don't need violence with them. We're not Antifa. We're not Black Lives Matter. We're not these radical militant organizations, okay? The answer is simply no. That's what we have to do. And if you look at what's going on, and we're going to talk a little bit more, we should get into it tonight. If you look at what's going on locally, especially when it comes to what's going on in the schools, parents are saying just that on certain issues. All right? And it's probably going to be honest. They're saying the answer is no.
They overplayed their hand. I mean, I'm seeing this now. There are Democrats who are basically telling the radical wing of their party, stop mentioning defund the police.
Yeah.
You can't mention it. It's a loser.
I was going to say, you say all the time, it's a loser.
It's a loser. Democrats are telling the radical elements in their party, stop saying it, because we're going to get destroyed in 2022 if you continue down that line.
I think they're going to get destroyed anyway. Okay, I really do. I think that these states, I think that what happened, honestly, just my own opinion, okay, is that the Republicans in the states lack the backbone to back Donald Trump and to really do something. Let's say they suspected something or whatever, to say, well, we want to look at, seriously audit the account and all that, and they lack the backbone to do it. And I think it's because of hatred for Trump, to be honest with you, Joe Racinello. Many of them are probably rhinos, but even aside from that, many are cowards, and they didn't want to back Donald Trump. But then afterwards, they probably said, all right, let's straighten everything out. Now, again, that's an opinion based on what we're seeing now. All right. I find some people in the media to be more credible than others. One of the people I was mentioning to Joe before the show that I listened to, because he's been around the block and he actually got sent to jail by Barack Obama, is Dinesh D'Souza. And D'Souza seems to me to be convinced that voter integrity laws are being put in place in all the hot spots. That is nothing but trouble for the Democrats. Trouble
but ultimately
for them, because they can't have what Joe described. They can't have voter ID. They want the dude to go in there, on election day, like I said, with the croissant and the Starbucks coffee, say, hey, man, I want to vote. Like, where's your ID? I ain't got one. All right, go ahead. That's what they want. And these states, I think, are actually making moves, Joe Racinello, to prevent that from happening. And certainly on the national level, they're fighting back against this federalizing of the election.
But ultimately, listen, and this is the lesson, we've talked about this, both Joe and myself, the solution isn't a political one in America. I mean, we're talking politics now. Politics is an endless struggle. I mean, this is where, frankly, you hear people, again, like Cinema, talking about ending the filibuster is a bad idea. It's an endless struggle. The solution to the culture is God. I'm telling you this right now. I know that's not a popular thing to say. It is. And the resistance is on both the Democratic side and the Republican side. They don't want to bend their knee. They don't. That's the issue with this country. This country always had an anti-Catholic twist from the very beginning. There was a prejudice. It's one of the last accepted prejudices in America. Mm-hmm. And politics, while, listen, you may for a while have some power, it's not forever. It isn't. Robert Redford said that, and to be honest with you, his politics nauseate me. But one thing I will say about him, when Donald Trump was elected, and he was very political during he's a very old man now, mm-hmm. He said, listen, everyone went nuts. He's like, you're not the president forever. Right. That was a very mature statement. I was actually impressed by
one of the I don't have HBO anymore. I have enjoyed their shows in the past, some of their shows. And I like to consider myself somebody who knows a lot about Roman history. So I loved their series that was actually created by John Milius. And I always liked John Milius, one of the only conservatives and Hollywood. And he was a co-writer on my favorite movie of all time, which is Apocalypse Now. But John Milius was the creator of Rome. And at one point in the series, when, I know we're not going to get into the history of the Civil War in Rome, but at one point, the Pompey and the Senate, they flee the city and they leave Rome unprotected. And the two main characters are coming on horseback, and they're marching with the other soldiers towards Rome. They're part of Caesar's army that's marching towards Rome. And one of them says, the city is unguarded. The Senate is left. And the other one says, yeah, and the sky's still above us and the earth's still below us. And it struck me. It was like, you're right, Joe Racinello. Politics is not the be-all and end-all. Now, it matters because it affects our lives. And we need to argue about politics. And we need to fight for the politics that we want. But at the end of the day, we have to remember, the sun is above us. The earth is below us, all right? And we can continue to fight as long as, like you said, we keep our focus not on the short-term political gains and victories, but having a better moral society. That's what we want for ourselves. That's what we want for our kids. And like Joe said earlier, ultimately the goal is heaven. And I want the arena, I want the football field, Joe, that we're playing on in the struggle of life. I want it to be a pretty good place.
No, I get it. But what I mean by that is, politics is downstream from culture. Mike Church retweeted. I actually saw it originally. And then Mike, it's funny, we're all on the same channel. Like, we're thinking 100% alike. He retweeted something that Strickland recently tweeted, talking about Fulton Sheen, saying we're basically too concerned with politics and not concerned with basically salvation. My point I'm bringing up is, if you really want to change the culture, you have to point it into the direction of God. You see, politics is downstream from the culture. That's the root. The root. You see, obviously, we want certain policies to be put forth. I mean, that's clear. But if you really want change to happen, significant change, you have to fix the culture.
Yep.
And how do you fix the culture? God. You can't legislate morality. You see, what the hard left is trying to do right now is they're trying to create equality through legislation. It's been tried and it will fail. It's failed in the past and it will fail again. It doesn't work that way. You see, in a Christian society, if it's acting accordingly, it will be equitable.
That doesn't mean it'll be equal. It'll be equitable, which means you're never going to have an equality of outcome. You have an equality of opportunity, and each human being is respected as being equal in their dignity, no matter who you are. But what they're always looking for, or at least this is what they say. We know they don't really believe it, Joe Racinello. They always say that they want equality of outcome. No, they don't, because they don't want to be like everybody else. These are elites. They want everybody else out there to be equally miserable while they sit on top and tell us all what to do. Okay. But Joe's right. We want, what's equitable is justice. And justice means getting your due. That means that the choices you make in life, they may set you back. I could say for my own personal life, okay? I thought I would have done a lot better in life. I made some bad choices, all right? I dealt with it. I got back with God, brought him back into my life, and guess what? Life hasn't been the same since. Thank God, okay? But the thing is, but to me, it's equitable. Because I don't deserve what, let's say, other people have who haven't made mistakes, or who've worked harder than me, or who studied harder in school, whatever the case might be. But this is the lie that the left tries to perpetrate. Somehow we're going to have an equal society. Everybody's going to be equal. Nobody's going to have more than us. It's like the Marxist wet dream. Okay? Well, you know what? It's detached from reality.
It is. It is. But again, if you have a formed Christian conscience, that doesn't mean you're going to live in a box. Father Lewis, who helped basically a good priest from the Bronx who inspired us to start the show and encouraged us, actually, that's why we're here, is because of him. He basically said, if everyone operated under a Christian mentality, there would be no need for a social net. Because basically, you would think about this. How many people are rich that don't give a dime to people? If you say, I mean, it's biblical. I think it's in the Gospel of John. If you don't love your brother and say you love God, he says you're a liar. That means if you see someone starving and you then walk right past them and you basically have hundreds of millions of dollars in your bank account, you don't love God.
Well, listen, this is,
I mean, like straight up. And
straight up is, I mean, and we're going to take a break in a minute, but I'd love to just give an illustration, and it's something that you obviously, you know, full well. I mean, the story, Jesus is the one who told the story about Lazarus and the rich man. And Dr. Brand Petrie pointed out too, when in his analysis that I watched from him, he's from Louisiana too. Dr. Brand Petrie said, the Bible never says that the rich man ever that he didn't follow the law or that he didn't believe in God. Didn't say anything like that. It just says he ignored Lazarus. And Lazarus was at his front stoop every single day.
But that's exactly right.
It was in his ignoring the poor, like completely ignoring the guy. And again, many of us feel, and we know this, we can't help everybody. But we could give of ourselves, and we could get through our time, our efforts, our treasure, our money. We could do a lot of different things to help the poor as best we can.
But that's a Christian society.
Let's take a break. We'll get back into it. You're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Racinello, away in the breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, follow Joe and I all across social media, Facebook, YouTube, for as long as we're there anyway. Rumble, Twitch, wherever you find us, help us out, okay? And we got a couple more segments to go. And remember, big promotional at the Crusade Channel. So go on crusadechannel.com, hit listen free and become a subscriber. We would encourage you to do so. Stick around. We'll talk to you on the other side of the break. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Racinello in the breach on the Crusade Channel. Always on air, always online at crusadechannel.com. So the only reason, Joe, I mentioned that is because I think it's an important parable, is because, yes, what they always, and this is what I hate more than anything, talking about, let's say, the left and getting back to them for a second, okay? They always try to ram that down our throat when it comes to caring for the poor. Let's get something straight from Frontline with Joe and Joe, okay? From the two of us, okay? The left doesn't pluck a hair for the poor. They don't. It's all lip service with them. When do they ever roll up their sleeves? Okay. When do they ever go to the soup kitchens? When do they ever get on a plane and go to Calcutta and go feed the poorest of the poor, or in Africa, or in Haiti? Okay. So stop lecturing to us about taking care of the poor. You simply want more government power. You hate the fact that we know you want more government power, and we're fighting you now like we never have before. Thank God.
Well, you know, here's the thing. It comes down to this, again, talking about Christendom. Christendom is about justice. And those who've been given much, much is expected. Again, obviously, communism says everyone's going to be equal. No one is always going to be equal. But here's the deal. I've used this analogy many times. Many people who are successful through gifts. Like if I could throw a fastball 120 miles an hour, it's a gift. And frankly, I'm paid very well. God is going to say to me, what did you do with what I gave you? He says this in the scripture. He says, I gave you 1 talent, I gave the other one 5, and I gave the other one 10. What did you do? You see, this is Christendom. Christendom means that if you are gifted, you're going to obviously take care of your own, because you have to. God makes that obligatory too. You're supposed to feed your family. You're supposed to educate your family. If you're Catholic, that's in the catechism, by the way. That's mandatory. You have to take care of your children and form them in the faith and educate them. However, if you are so gifted, you are then to take care of others. This is a Christian idea, and it goes against Americanism. When you hear the Americanism of a lot of, frankly, like talk shows like the Hannitys, the prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
You know, here's the thing. It comes down to this. Where are you building your kingdom?
I heard a guy one time, he said, the day after I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, I had a Rolex on my wrist and a Corvette in my driveway. Joe, I'm not exaggerating, by the way. No, it's just one of the, and you want to talk about, now again, we know that guy's a charlatan. We know that, okay? But that sometimes is a prevailing thing. Believe in Jesus and he gives you all sorts of gifts and you're going to prosper and everything else. No, I remember hearing something about, listen, you got to take up your cross. I mean, am I misreading?
Well, no, but it's about self-sacrifice. I mean, again, Christ became poor so we could become rich. Who is richer than God? You know, like people miss that on this earth. To be honest with you, Christ makes it obligatory. It's in the book of Matthew. What you did to the least, you did to me. You did to me. And there's a lot of people in this country, frankly, that have a ton of money. And here's another thing, and this goes against, listen, because I'm not a Republican. I got news for you. I'm a human, and I am Catholic, and I got news for you. Listen, I'm not even preaching to you. I'm just telling you. Like what Father Lewis said, if everyone did their part, even if you fed one person, there'd be no hunger on this planet. Everyone would have a place to stay. You never go broke by giving, ever. And I got news for you. It's obligatory.
Yep.
Francis said this in the chat room, and whoever Francis, I believe it's a woman. It's an ES as opposed to an IS. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But she's right. It's obligatory. It's in the book of Matthew. Those who've been given much, much is expected. And if Americans behaved in that manner, we wouldn't have what we see on the news today. There's no doubt about that.
Right. And let's end that part of the conversation with saying, and everyone out there has been given life, and therefore you should extend that to others and protect innocent human life, particularly in the womb. If you want to start somewhere in America, let's start by ending the baby killing. That'd be a great place to start, in the opinion of Joe and Joe, on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Now, we want to talk about a little bit about justice, okay? Justice. What is justice, Joe Racinello?
Well, equity.
Getting what you're due?
Absolutely.
All right? It's what you're due. In other words, if you've done something wrong, in justice, you have a price to pay. If you've done something good in justice, you should be rewarded. It's getting what you're due, okay? Now, the thing is this. There are some people in history who are due some pretty severe punishment. Those who would, round up Jews and stick them in concentration camps. Those who would enslave Africans, okay? Those who would send Christians to the lions in the arena, okay? Many people don't die and they don't get justice in this world. They'll get it in the next, okay? And they'll get God's justice. But here's the thing. I don't have to, and Joe and I say this all the time, I am not responsible for the sins of other people. I am not responsible simply by virtue of the color of my skin, okay, for the sins of America's past. I'm not. Quite frankly, I'm not. No, nor is Joe Racinello, nor are you. And I am not going to allow, and Joe's not going to allow our kids in the public schools to be taught that they need to hate themselves and to recognize first and foremost, as the first and foremost characteristic of another human being, their skin color. And then form a judgment on that based on what they're being told by the radical left. And that's what critical race theory is all about. It is unjust. First of all, it's a lie, okay? And it's unjust. It treats people unjustly because I am, again, one more time, not paying for the sins of other people. And I think it's an important conversation because guess what? Not just Joe and I, and not just the Crusade Channel, there's a lot of people fighting back right now against critical race theory. And we need to talk about it.
Well, Hannah Blue tells us that Senator Cruz from Texas introduced a bill to block federal funding for critical race theory. Now, obviously, the left would expect Cruz to do that. And he had a lot of strong things to say. I want to focus on what Burgess Owens had to say.
I have his football card. I have Burgess Owens' New York Jets football card.
Now, he's an African-American man. He is a Republican in Utah. He's a congressman, and he played football. Professional football, as Joe said. And he also introduced in the lower chamber a companion bill to Cruz's. And this is what he had to say. He said, I grew up, again, this is an African-American male. He said, and I think it's more important than what Ted Cruz had to say, because people expect Ted Cruz to say what he said. But this gentleman, I don't think a lot of people would expect to hear it. And frankly, it doesn't get much press. He said, I grew up attending segregated schools in the Jim Crow South during a time when people were treated differently based on the color of their skin. He goes on. Owens explained that critical race theory preserves this way of thinking and undermines civil rights, constitutionally guaranteed equal protection before the law, and U.S. institutions at large. This is the United States of America, and no one should ever be subjected to the discrimination that our laws so clearly prohibit. Now, this is a person who, again, he's stating he lived under the segregated Jim Crow laws. He is a black man. Do you take him for a fool? Do you take him to be stupid? Yet he's against this. You see, they're quick to call me a racist because I'm against critical race theory. They're quick to call Ted Cruz a racist. Are you going to call Burgess Owens a racist?
No, they'll call him an Uncle Tom.
Why?
That's what they'll call him.
Why?
Because they're
no.
people.
But this is what I'm saying. I'm asking the common man to think about this for a second. He's a black man. Do you think, regardless of what you call yourself, your political stripe, do you think that a black man would basically support or be against something that was going to basically put his fellow black people under the thumb of the American people? There's no way.
No way.
No way. I don't take him for a fool. You see, this is what I'm saying. That's why his voice is important. Yet it's not advertised. It's not even discussed. And frankly, you can't even have this conversation in political circles because the press has brainwashed people that if you have anything even like at all to say or question about critical race theory, talking about the equitability of it,
right,
you're immediately a racist.
Right.
Well, here's a gentleman who grew up under a racist system, and he's against it. So what's the problem? Why aren't they listening to this guy? Why aren't they even debating him?
They can't. They can't. The same way they've never debated Thomas Sowell, the same way they've never debated Walter Williams, okay? The same way they will never, ever debate any of these guys. Let me tell you something. If there's one thing that you notice, black conservatives, the ones whose voices have been silenced for decades, okay, these guys are the smartest of the smart, man. Like Thomas Sowell, I don't even want to be in the same room with Thomas Sowell. Yeah, I feel like a neophyte. The guy is just so super smart. And in life, he started out a Marxist. All right. He started out, and then the documentary I saw about him when he was asked about that, he said, "What changed your mind?" He said, "Facts." You know, because obviously when you look at the history of Marxism, not that you need to, Marxism should be able to be debunked by most moral and people, right, just looking at it on paper. But certainly when you look at it in practice, you say, absolutely not. We don't want that. So Thomas Sowell is one of those people that you never heard from him. Clarence Thomas is going to go down as one of the greatest Supreme Court justices of all time. And the left still thinks of him as an Uncle Tom. In other words, they have never treated him well whatsoever. But Joe and I are the racists. You're all racist out there. In other words, speak out against critical race theory and you're a racist. If you're Burgess Owens, you're just carrying water for the white man. I mean, this is this type of nonsense. But you want to know what, Joe Racinello? When you look at the fact that, let's say, for argument's sake, sports organizations that have embraced this nonsense, their ratings are in the tank. When you look at the fact that Brian Stelter, what is he, MSNBC or CNN? CNN.
His ratings
are in the tank. Same with the station in general. You know what? People are getting tired of it. You can't tell people simply because they disagree with you politically that they're racist and think they're going to keep listening to you.
But the thing is, that's the name of the game, Joe. You see, they know what they're doing. And that's what they're going to do for the People Act. They're going to say that basically the Republicans suppress the vote of the African-American people. And you're a racist. This is the word, because they know what the stigma is around that word. Mm-hmm. And frankly, what's going to happen is going to be used too much. You see, it's starting to lose its weight, the word. It's sad, actually, because it is an ugly word.
Can I give you a statistic that I recently heard? That the projections, again, these are projections, that over the next 4 years, that the Republicans, again, we use that word loosely. We're hoping we mean much more conservative party, okay? The Republicans could get as much as 70% of the support of Asian Americans, over 50% of Hispanic Americans, and over 25% of African Americans.
See, that the big one, to be honest with you, is the
Hispanics.
Latino.
And by the way, and then please comment on this. And because they're starting to not listen to CNN and the liberal media, because Hispanics, generally speaking, are Catholic, and they don't buy in for, generally speaking, abortion, gay marriage, and the whole 9 yards. And now they're finding out, Well, the party that they're saying that they want to vote for, well, they're in support of all this, and they're going, no, and they're not in support. Those who came here legally do not support illegal immigration. That's another thing. But go ahead, Joe.
Anytime Barack Obama, and I'm going to use the term when he is deployed.
Oh, he's deployed like the Barry missile.
Pay attention.
Missile.
Pay attention to what he says, and this is why. Whenever ground is gained by conservatives, Obama is deployed. Listen to what he says, not taking it to heart, but when he's speaking out against something, know that there is danger for the left.
Yep.
And I say that because he vehemently spoke out about the Hispanics in Florida, and that scares the living daylights
What did he say?
Well, basically, he said they called them basically traitors. Basically,
that's like Joe Biden telling African Americans, if you're even thinking about voting for Trump, you ain't black.
Because
thing?
Here's the thing: Latinos in America, if you lose that vote, they're finished.
Oh yeah.
When I mean finished, because they're the only ones that have kids, period.
And they're more conservative than you give them credit for, Mr. and Mrs. Liberal Leftists, Nancy Pelosi and the rest of you. Because when they find out again, one more time, these are socially conservative people. If they're coming, the predominant group in America amongst Hispanics, Joe Racinello, are Mexicans, okay? And for the most part, Mexicans, I mean, Mexico itself is another story, but Mexicans are still a Catholic people. They don't believe in abortion, all right? Again, a lot of this has been imposed. It's been imposed in Mexico and America. This is imposed by the powers that be. That's why we need to fight against it. As Hispanics get more and more, I don't want to say educated, just let's say informed. Let's just say they get more informed. There's no filters in between, and they actually hear what the Democrats are all about. These people are going to turn around and say, well, I'm not for any of that stuff. No, I'll vote for that guy. Ted Cruz more reflects what I believe, not Beto O'Rourke, if you want to use another Texan for an example. I don't agree with Beto O'Rourke on anything. I don't think two men should raise a child. I don't think two women should raise a child. I don't believe in baby killing. I don't believe in all of this stuff. So you know what? They look and they say, well, this is a party that seems to more reflect my values. I'm going to vote for them. And that is unintended consequences because they want the Hispanics to come here because they think, number one, their position, by the way, on Hispanics in general, all right, and the way they try to manipulate our immigration laws to have more Hispanics come over is blatantly racist too. They think all those Hispanics are stupid. Joe and Joe don't. Joe and Joe don't, okay? They think all those Hispanics come over are stupid and will never pick up a newspaper or will never, let's say, put on, I say it lightly, Fox News or get an alternative point of view. They think because the Democrats have always been the party of racists, they think that those Hispanics are too stupid to try to find out what they're all about. And they're losing that battle because, Joe, 50% Hispanics vote for Republicans. Democrats are done. And you can forget it if 25% of African Americans can consistently vote Republican.
Well, keep
the
this
Democrats
in
are
mind.
finished.
A lot of Latinos who are here legally came from totalitarian countries.
Mm-hmm.
Take the Cubans. They've lost Cuba. Florida, by the way, is done with regard to the DNC. You're never winning Florida again. Not just because of the Latinos that you lost, but also the election laws that basically just got passed by DeSantis.
Right.
You're
not
not
a guy with stones.
I'm just telling you. So, and by the way, only two presidents have basically sat in the chair that have lost both Ohio and Florida. The two Catholic presidents, JFK, which we began a whole story on in the beginning of this show, and Joe Biden, and both presidencies have been questioned. It doesn't happen. You need to win one of the two.
And both now seem to be solidly Republican. Ohio's now a red state. I think, if my numbers are correct, Trump won Ohio by 8 points. Okay, that's blue collar, roll up your sleeves, go to work in the steel mill, Ohio. Okay, so get it straight. Ohio's gone, and I think you're right. I think a lot of people that are leaving blue states and they want to go to a warmer climate and a better climate as far as state government is concerned have gone down to Florida. They're going to Texas and they're going to Arizona. Okay, and let me tell you something. They're emptying the blue states little by little. Okay. And conservatives should leave blue states, by the way. If you can, go to a state and make a conservative state even more conservative, or maybe a purplish state more conservative. Okay. And get away from these states. All right. And Florida's offering that. Texas offers that. Arizona offers that. Pick whichever one you want. But the fact is, I think you're right, Joe Racinello. Florida, I think, is gone for them.
It's done.
A lot of people that have left here, they're not going out of Florida to bring their liberal politics. They're going out of Florida because they want Florida's conservative politics.
And also, again, pay attention to the Obama statements, because he gets deployed when a nerve is struck.
That guy's like a sell signal on a stock market.
I'm telling you.
You see the red on the screen and you're like, sell,
Exactly.
Get out of that position.
Because they
Same thing
deploy him.
When you see Barry on the screen, when you see him going across, you better run for the hills. Well, no, actually, you should take encouragement, because you probably you're doing something right.
No, there's no doubt. And I bring that up again. It's because of the Latino vote. That terrifies them. It terrifies them. They need that to win. And frankly, they've lost that in many respects because they've overplayed their hand.
Let me do some promos, Joe Racinello, because we got to go to a break. You're listening to the Frontline with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Racinello in the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air, always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Our social media, which is the only social media out there worth actually socializing in, is online at crusadechannel.com/chat. Please, if you like what Joe and I do, please, by all means, you could support us on Patreon, okay, at patreon.com / the Frontline with Joe and Joe. And wherever you find us on social media, please like, subscribe, and share, and do all that fun stuff. And by all means, take a good hard look at the Crusade channel. Go on crusadechannel.com. Listen free. Listen to Mike Church. Listen to Rick Barrett. Listen to Dave Simpson. Listen to Brother Andre Marie. Listen to Kennedy Hall. You're going to love it, and you're going to want to become a subscriber. I believe it's only $10 a month. Joe and I are both subscribers to the Crusade channel, and we gain nothing. If they gain 5,000 subscribers tomorrow, we don't gain anything. We are proud to be a part of that station and what the King Dude does. So stick around. We'll talk to you on the other side of the break. Welcome back, everyone, to the Frontline with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Racinello. We have one more segment, so let's jump right back into it on the Crusade channel, always on air, always online at crusadechannel.com. I want to end the last conversation about critical race theory with just one line before we move on about what Ted Cruz said. He said, quote, "The federal government has no right to force a political agenda onto Americans, especially one that aims to tear down our institutions and divide us based on race." All I have to say to that, Joe Racinello, is amen.
Well, this one's an interesting story, I think. Alan Bakari reports that conservative rappers Bryson Gray and Patriot J say Safe Spaces. It's their new collaborative song, basically speaking out against Fauci, Biden, and overly sensitive leftist social justice warriors, has been banned from both Spotify and SoundCloud, which doesn't shock me.
I got to stop you for a second. Before the show, I went on YouTube and I listened to it, okay? I love these guys. And Joe's going to tell you why. He's going to give you a couple of lyrics. I love both of these. I want to hang out with them. I want to have a scotch with them. I want to smoke a cigar with them. All right. In other words, and I want to have them on the front line with Joe and Joe. I want to reach out to Bryson Gray and Patriot J. Say, come on, guys, come on for a segment on the Crusade channel because we're going to have some fun. These guys, okay, they're normal guys. They're guys like Joe and I. Their genre is rap. Okay, Joe and I are, what do you want to call us, news personalities, okay? We comment on the news. There's a couple of Catholic jamokes from New Jersey, okay? We're all doing our thing, but they're saying the same thing we are. They're saying in their songs the same thing we are, and they got banned for it.
And like we said, we're shadow banned on Facebook. People have told us, again, unrelated people. Someone told me yesterday from the town in Lyndhurst, where I go to Mass, basically said to me, Joe, you still doing the show? I'm like, yeah, Dan. He's like, I don't get notices on Facebook anymore. And then Barbara Farley from Wisconsin, who's been a faithful listener for 3 years, she also notified us that she no longer gets them. Our numbers have gone down by 900.
And let's be straight. We're not the biggest fish in the pond. Far from it. Okay. But here's the thing. I personally have 3,000 friends on Facebook. All right. Frontline with Joe and Joe has about 3,500 followers. Now, how does that translate into 100 views?
It doesn't.
On Facebook.
We were getting over, sometimes we'd get like 1,500
real
in a
time.
week.
We were and we were getting real time
So
views.
why do I bring this up? Not to wave our own flag, but
no.
what's happening to these dudes on Spotify and SoundCloud is happening to us too, to a degree. They're limiting our audience on purpose. So basically, the message from SoundCloud posted by Gray on Twitter claims that the song was taken down for incitement to hatred.
It was not.
But the song's lyrics denounce supporters of Black Lives Matter and viewers of CNN as brain dead, and declares that they were only two. Basically, they said there's only two genders.
That's a truthful statement.
Okay, but this is what basically they said. And I think they're spot on. We're talking about Gray and Patriot J. They said, the band just shines a spotlight on how far big tech is willing to take their censorship of dissenting views. Spotify and SoundCloud don't actually care about allegedly hateful or violent songs being on their platform, because if they did, they would have taken down almost all of the popular rap songs on their platform. Frankly, they're completely correct. If you listen to gangster rap, it's off the hook. It's off the hook.
And that's real incitement to violence.
Now, we were silenced, they say, for being brave enough to go against the radical left agenda, and now we're paying the price. Just another day in Joe Biden's America. Now, this is an example of the overplay.
Yep.
Because what I'm saying is this. There's certain things Americans may disagree on. Could be abortion. However, there's certain tenets of Americanism that all Americans just about agree upon, and that is free speech. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you believe in free speech, and there is a segment of the elite population that is basically saying, no, we will tell you what you can and cannot say. And here's the interesting thing. DeSantis said this recently, and I think he completely understands it. And frankly, that's why I think he's going to go far. He said, the American people don't buy that. It's the elite institutions that do.
Mm-hmm.
I got news for you. You need the American people to get the seat. You do.
I'm going to say
and
something.
They forgot it.
No, well, yeah, you're absolutely right. I would say this too. In other words, to all the other rappers out there, okay? When you were singing F the police, and when you were spouting out your racist lyrics, okay, nobody shut you down, okay? You were able to say what you want, whether it be the guys from the movie, what's his name? Whether it be Ice Cube. I don't like to use the word. I won't use the word ends with attitude. NWA. In other words, all your hateful lyrics, Ice-T back in the day talking about cop killing, you were able to have your free speech platform. You argued for free speech, and nobody took you down. And you got rich over it. You got rich over it. You're filthy rich, all of you, okay? You need to defend these guys. You, whether you agree with them or not, you need to defend them if you want any credibility. Because I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of young black guys out there who don't agree with the left, all right? Black men in America do not agree with gay marriage. They don't. Okay, I got news for you.
It's proven in California.
What's his name? Kanye's out there talking about how the left has convinced black men that it's okay to kill their babies. The scales are starting to fall off many people's eyes. Okay, they don't like that kind of talk, and a lot of guys like Bryson Gray and Patriot J are saying that, particularly on the transgender issue. Okay, and you need to come to their back. And you need to tell Spotify and SoundCloud that they can't broadcast your stuff unless they're allowed to broadcast them. Come to the back or take the back of your African-American brothers who are in the same business as you are, if you want any credibility.
Well,
and if you don't,
you talk about business.
And if you don't, shame on you.
Because it's all about that. Why people don't speak. It's like the emperor's new clothes. You talk about some of these things because it's in. You know, it's funny. You mentioned about business, Joe, and I recently saw this week that Major League Baseball, I think it's Sunday Night Baseball, is down 49%.
Yeah.
Now, what I am going to make, I'm going to make a bold prediction. As this continues, as you get woke, you will get broke. And when that happens, more pervasively, and it will, they're going to drop this agenda faster than you could blink an eye. Corporate America, you see, that was the mistake of corporate America. They should never have gotten involved because they're losing money. And they're not running for office. They got caught up in it. I'm surprised because most times corporate America, I mean, I work in it, you know, but they're evil. The people, a lot, I mean, I hate to say that. Like a lot of the people that run these companies straight up and down, they're demonic. They're masochists. They care about nothing more than money. But they actually, if you ask me, made a bad choice. A choice many times I don't see because it was dumb. They should never have gotten involved in this.
The only thing I could see is maybe they sacrificed a few dollars for power because they have ingratiated themselves into the power with the powers that be right now. In other words, and because they're all part of the woke agenda, maybe they're seeing something beyond. I know what you're saying, Joe. It doesn't seem like a smart businessman would cheese off half his customer base.
That's my point.
Or even more, unless there's something better or greater in their mind to gain, which could be, and a lot of people are talking about it, the whole globalist movement and their position in it. That they firmly believe that we're going to have a global economy.
Well, maybe you're right.
And maybe they want to make sure they secure their position in that system. All right, in which case they will have more money than they're sacrificing. Now, again, that's pure conjecture on my part. I have no way to back that up because, again, as a businessman in America, if I'm the CEO of JP Morgan, I'm going to be like, I'm sorry, homosexual group, pro-life group, Catholic Church, Jews, we don't give money to anybody. We do business.
We're a bank.
We're a bank. If you're gay,
whatever,
we do business with you. If you're Catholic, we do business with you. Notice we just do banking. Okay, I'm using them as an example. If you're in the car business, we just sell cars. That's all we do. So it doesn't strike me that if you're really concerned about your bottom line, you would do that. Like you said, it's a bad decision. But ultimately, they have to be making that decision because they see some other greater benefit. I can only think that they really believe in this great reset. They really are listening to Klaus Schwab from Germany, all right? And there's going to be literally a new world order. And they're making sure they secure their position in that new world order. And it makes sense because they're big enough to do it.
Frankly, I didn't think of it that way because when you start hearing some of these numbers get thrown around, like you're down 49%. I mean, just thinking of it from a practical perspective, I mean, if half your paycheck got taken away, I mean, damn, that's a lot.
See, and baseball is a different story than banking. Most people bank, all right? Not everybody watches baseball. I would think that baseball, the people that run Major League Baseball would realize, you know, there's a lot of people in this world, they don't watch baseball. A lot of people in other countries, they don't watch baseball. Who gives a crap about the New World Order? We got to get our profits up in America because it's Americans that support us. So again, the sports organizations, no matter what, they made a horrible decision, okay? Because I just don't see it. I mean, unless I'm not a dumb guy, but unless I'm just completely missing it. But I would say this. I want to mention Representative Gosar from Arizona. Okay, a Republican from Arizona. I like this because it kind of little Joe Racinello. It's a little reminiscent of the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Maybe Representative Gosar is watching the Frontline with Joe and Joe. I don't know. He says, quote, talking about Bryson Gray and Patriot J. He said, quote, these guys are deep in the culture war and taking incoming fire. Whoa,
love it.
He said, this is where now this is important. He hits the nail on the head. This is where conservatives abandoned the battlefield 40 years ago. Respect. That's what he says. You want to know what? It's the truth. We as conservatives abandoned academia. We abandoned media. Conservatives got out of the media. Hollywood at one time had a very good amount of conservatives. Okay. In other words, we abandoned academia. We went into think tanks instead. Well, in the meantime, Harvard's taken billions of our tax dollars and indoctrinating kids in critical race theory and critical legal studies department. Okay, at Harvard Law School. In other words, we've abandoned all these things. We abandoned the culture war. We got to get back in the culture war. Joe and I are there. Nobody's going to blame us. We can always do more, but nobody's going to blame Joe and Joe. We're risking our necks. We both could lose our jobs. We're not martyrs. We're not holier than anybody. We both could lose our jobs if we get doxxed. That's the bottom line. And you want to know what? We think it's worth it. We think it's worth it because we're not abandoning our culture. Because if we want our nation to be better, we need to get our culture back on track. We say that all the time because that is the stone cold truth. That's the stone cold truth. So kudos to Representative Gosar, but more so to Bryson Gray and Patriot J. Thank you guys for saying it the way it is and for pointing out in your genre, in rap, pointing out some of the lies out there.
Well, the next story is interesting, I think, and I want to take it in a different direction that Joe may have thought when he basically put this article out to me.
There you go, throwing me curveballs.
No, but
again.
I think it'll be interesting, actually, Joe, and you may agree with me. Actually, I think you're going to. But the Tea Party reported that Hillary Clinton's campaign official and founder of a group to end sexual violence against children is sentenced to 13 years in prison. The gentleman's name is Joel Davis. And basically, he did some pretty horrible things. He had sex with a 15-year-old boy. He was found, he's a Columbia graduate. He was found with 3,700 images of what's it called?
Child porn.
Yeah, horrible. Anyway, he got sentenced to jail. Now, it's a horrible story, and I don't want to, beat the guy to death, because obviously he did something horrible. But here's the deal. Everyone beats up the Catholic Church about this. And this is the angle I wanted to go. And I want to introduce two terms to you. One is hebephilia, and it's defined as an adult that has a strong and persistent sexual interest in pubescent children, typically children the ages of 11 to 14, although the age of onset and completion of puberty may vary. Also, another term I want to introduce to you is ephebophilia, and it's a condition in which an adult, usually a male, is primarily sexually attracted to older teens aged 15 to 19. Now, this gentleman, Joel Davis, had sex with a 15-year-old boy, solicited that sex. Obviously, that's against the law. He went to prison. The vast majority, this is factual, the vast majority of abuse by priests who victimize persons under the age of 18 has taken the form of ephebophilia, which again is an adult male having sex with an older teen aged 15 to 19. Yet most of the public has the impression that this abuse was involving young children, prepubescent children. Now, if you don't believe what I'm saying, look up John Jay's study on the priesthood,
commissioned by the Catholic bishops.
Now, I am not, but it was an independent study, and John Jay is a college, a state college in New York City. For those who don't know, clearly it's not an advocate of the Catholic Church. 80%, you could look it up, took place, the abuse, and they looked at, I believe, 100 years. It was children that were past puberty. Okay. And they were men who were having sex with these young boys. It's not pedophilia.
Right.
And that's why I introduced those two terms.
Because that's the lie, but go ahead.
What does that make those men? It makes them gay. They're gay men. You see, this is what's not talked about.
Because you can't say that.
But this is true. Look at John Jay's study. Look at the definitions. Now, am I excusing it?
No.
No. They are equally as criminal as Joel Davis, who worked for Hillary Clinton's campaign. They all have to go to jail. However, what unifies them all is that they're gay. And here's something else about the Catholic Church, which we have covered on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. If you look at what the popes have stated, now, is this practiced in by many bishops across the world? No. But the popes, including Francis, including John Paul, including Joseph Ratzinger, who was Benedict XVI, all the way to John the 23rd, they basically said that if you have strong homosexual tendencies, you cannot be a priest. Francis has said that. Look it up. My point is, if you are an active homosexual, you can't be a priest. Why? Because you're not laying anything down. That's the theology behind it. You see, a man who wants to marry a woman lays down his desire and sacrifices it to marry a woman to be betrothed to the Catholic Church. You're not giving anything up. And what I'm also pointing out by this story is this: why don't the press bring out the fact that these men who are having sex with children, well, young men who are at post-puberty, that they're gay.
Because it destroys the narrative. They have to make it seem like they were abusing 5-year-olds. Okay. And again, there's nothing good about any of this. Okay. But in 81%, that's the number, Joe. 81% of the cases, all right, it was ephebophilia. It was grown men going after post-pubescent teenage boys. Now, what does that do to the narrative? Okay. By the way, just so everybody knows, and this is one of those times where I'm going to fault Michael Voris. He had on the director or the writer of the movie Spotlight. Spotlight was a pretty good movie. All right. It really was. Okay. And I know it wasn't made for the reasons that Hollywood made it. But if you look at it, it did expose the bishops and the way they really mishandled that whole situation. They should have been truthful about it. But the director or writer, I forgot which one, call him the director or writer, they sneak something into the movie that is meant to be snuck into the movie. There's a guy on speakerphone who's talking to the reporter. I think it's Michael Keaton, okay? And he says, oh, and by the way, now this is so deliberate, Joe Racinello, and you know I'm a movie buff. You know I listen for these things in movies, okay? He's on speakerphone, and he says, oh, and by the way, remember, this is not a homosexual problem. This is a problem of priestly celibacy. That's the lie that they snuck into the movie. That's the lie that the writer told to Michael Voris on Church Militant. And Michael Voris he really didn't get into it with him, but really Michael Voris should have stopped him. And he should have said, well, wait a minute. No, it is a problem of homosexuality. It is. It's not a problem. It's not a problem of priestly celibacy. Has nothing to do with it. In fact, it's so stupid. It's a stupid analysis because it's a lie. Okay. Joe and I said all the time, men who are attracted to women, okay, who break their vows, they leave the priesthood. That's a fact, by the way. They leave the priesthood. Okay. And they get laicized and then they go and live married life. I'm not saying that if they feel that desire and they leave the priesthood, they're not causing scandal, they're leaving. Okay. And they're doing it properly according to church law.
But okay? They are called, that is a sin, a horrible sin.
To break your vows.
That's my point.
You're right. Well, they obviously have to atone for that. Okay. But the church is merciful. All right. And if the person gets laicized, they could still be a Catholic. But the church is merciful on that. But my point is, but they leave. They don't stay. But the homosexuals stay. Why? Because that's where the boys are. I don't know why this is shocking to people.
Well, that is a problem. I mean, we could have a whole show on that, and that's not, direction I really wanted to go, but it's true. I mean, there is definitely, just like, to be honest with you, I mean, there's a network of homosexual bishops and there's a network of homosexual priests in the Catholic Church. I mean, that's undeniable. However, there are good priests, and you could find them if you look for them. And it's not fair. And why do I bring this up? First of all, that network shouldn't exist. And there's always been problems in the church, and there always will be problems in the church. Why do I bring this up? Because it's a lie. It's a lie that when people say that priests are pedophiles, no, they're actually not. The priests that were found to be guilty were having sex with boys who were after the age of puberty, and those men were gay. It's not talked about. It's talked about here. Why? Because it's the truth.
That's right. And a person who's been all over this for decades is Bill Donahue from the Catholic League. Bill Donahue has pointed out time and time and time again, particularly referring to the John Jay study. There's no more. Let's put it like this. It is a problem, and the church has dealt with it in a very, very bad way. Okay. Really, really mishandled it. No matter what motives you want to give to the bishops who did mishandle it, the bottom line is they mishandled it. But Bill Donahue points out there's no more problem in the Catholic Church than there is in the synagogues, than there is in the mosques, and that there is in the public school establishment. You think CNN and MSNBC are going to report on them and the stuff that those teachers get away with and the administrators get away with? They're around young kids all day long. The problem in public schools, Joe, is horrible, but you'll never hear the light shed on that. But A-OK to beat up on the Catholic Church. A-OK to do that.
And it's important, like Joe said, the church has not handled this properly in many, 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 many corners of it. However, just as Joel Davis, who worked for the Clinton campaign, should go to jail, so should the priests that committed this crime, but it's also not fair or accurate to group all priests into this bucket. because it's just simply not true.
It's not true. And and we'll end with that, because what it does is it gives a it makes it very hard for our good priests, who already have a very difficult job at catechizing us, okay, and forming us properly. They already have a tough job because they're fighting an uphill battle in this swamp of a culture. They don't need to have their jobs made harder, and their jobs are made harder because of these priests who have broken their vows, who maybe never even took their vows seriously, whatever the case might be. They need to go. The church needs to be purged, okay? That's the bottom line, or else we're not going to recover from this. The church needs to be purged. We have to go, Joe Racinello. We had a really good conversation.
It was good.
We love you all. We absolutely do. All right. And we're glad that you joined us at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, the chat room will be open, crusadechannel.com/chat, and become a subscriber. But listen first. Go to crusadechannel.com, hit listen free, and hear all of the content on the Crusade channel, because we know you're going to love it. And we know that you're going to want to become a subscriber. Follow Joe and I on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Gab, wherever you Twitch, wherever you can find us. Please click something that's going to help us, whatever it might be. Particularly hit the share button. Hit the share button. Share us in groups. Get our, and we think you already have been, because our numbers definitely went up tonight, or over the weekend, I should say. So we really appreciate that. And remember, we're on Patreon at patreon.com/the Frontline with Joe and Joe, if you want to drop in a couple of bucks. And remember, until next week, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.